Hello everyone and welcome to Toma Uselessness. Dan here doing some solo recording, and what I wanted to do was talk about a bunch of movies, kind of inspired by, earlier I had done some kind of double features and I meant to do more of them, but this time I kind of went a little bigger. I went with 4 movies and I did like a racing tetralogy out of like kind of, no real impetus, but I was kind of like, I hadn't seen Ford versus Ferrari, and I knew Ferrari had come out, and recently, of course, this year we had F1, so I was like, I'll watch those movies and then talk about them. And then after I watched Ford versus Ferrari, I was like, oh yeah, there's like the 1971 Steve McQueen movie, so I was like, okay, I'll throw that in there too. So it expanded to 4 movies, and so I just wanted to kind of talk a bit about them. Different eras of filmmaking, different eras of racing, and it was, just kind of interesting. So starting back with, we'll do chronological order. Le Mans, 1971, directed by Lee H. Katzin and John Sturgis, written Harry Kleiner, John T. Kelly, starring Steve McQueen, Siegfried Rauch, and Elga Anderson. The reason there's 2 directors is that there was an unfortunate creative difference between McQueen and the original director, John Sturges, who had worked with him previously on stuff, because McQueen wanted to do more of a documentary style film, and Sturges wanted to kind of create like a standardized narrative, like with a racing movie and a story and everything like that. So there was just kind of an irreconcilable difference, and then Sturges left the project, which is kind of interesting because what we got, it goes down pretty smooth. Like, it's an hour 45, I think I want to say. After reading and, learning about how it wanted to be more documentary style, it kind of makes more sense because there's like tons of just no dialogue, just tons of B-roll. There is a lot of stuff where it's like, filmmaking from the 70s where, like in the beginning in particular, there's Steve McQueen's driving like a Porsche, and then he's going down to through France, and he's going to a certain section, and then you see some things and like a close-up and like a flashback. Whereas I guess if it was more traditional narrative or made in the 90s to now, like that, it would have been more quick cuts, shorter things of him driving, and maybe beauty shots of the Porsche with some music. Like, this is just nothing. So that was kind of noticeable about the movie, but it was very enjoyable. I really liked it. Like I said, it went down pretty smooth. It was kind of interesting because we are following McQueen's character, and in Le Mans they switch drivers, and so it'll be him driving, and there's beauty shots of him driving and such like that, and then he switches out, and then it follows him going to like a cafe to get some lunch and some food, and then he's like talking with a woman there, and then he goes and gets some rest, and it just flip-flops around. So that was kind of just an interesting angle where it wasn't just because, again, they didn't have the same technology, of course, that we do now, but like, so it wasn't just constant race footage. That made it kind of neat and just like a little different than I was expecting. One thing that you full credit, of course, to them, because it was the 70s. There's a few crashes. I think there's like 3 main ones that we see. There might be some more other ones and stuff like that, but like, because it was back then, they full on had to crash these cars, and unfortunately, one of the stunt drivers, he got a big cut on his leg. Brake fluid and debris got into the cut, and then he had to actually get his leg amputated to avoid it from infection, which is just brutal. His name was David Piper, which is like, again, just filmmaking from a different era where you're like, oh, goddamn. The crash footage is spectacular. There's, like I said, there's 3 main ones that I can remember, and just a kind of a neat, simple story that they put onto this, and similar to like that we'll see in Ford vs Ferrari in particular, but like McQueen, he's Steve McQueen, and he's like killing it, driving super well. He screws up, and then his car crashes. He's out of the race, and then eventually he gets subbed in, and then helps like that team's factory car win. So it wasn't like, a story about him winning and stuff like that. It was just he helped a team out and a teammate because he blocked like the second place car that was trying to like pass his teammate kind of thing. So which was kind of just unexpected, because you get in there, you're like, all right, here comes our hero, he's gonna save the day, and he does, but just not by winning. Yeah, so essentially, like Hal Hamilton explained, we had the star, we had the drivers, we had an incredible array of technical support, we had everything except a script. So they were just kind of winging it. One thing that was kind of funny is that all the Ferraris in the movie were actually borrowed from a Belgian Ferrari distributor, Jacques Swatters, because Ferrari didn't want to participate because they don't win. Porsche wins the Le Mans that year, and it actually also reflected real life where a Porsche won in the 1970 or 71 Le Mans. But yeah, that was, like I said, I do recommend. I think like all of these movies are pretty watchable in their own way, and like I said, this is just like a simple, goes down pretty quick and kind of a neat thing, and it's just like a neat film from that era. Knowing that it was meant to be more documentary kind of makes sense, because there's just tons of shots of just like people walking around and like Le Mans, like sleeping and waking, and you're just like, this has nothing to do with anything, but it's just kind of showing the the atmosphere and the party that is the 24-hour race. Yeah, sorry, I guess I didn't explain that. Le Mans is a 24-hour endurance race. These cars, they just go 24 hours. You're allowed multiple drivers, so then one person doesn't have to do it all and then gets fatigued and dies. But there are rules as well about like how long they're allowed to drive for before they have to switch. And one thing I do like with the rule set is that like at pit stops they have to turn their car off to get fuel, so that it's safer, and as well as that shows like your car's reliability, because it has to be able to turn back on and keep going. So kind of interesting there, which leads right into Ford versus Ferrari. This one directed by James Mangold, written by Jez Butterworth, John Henry Butterworth, and Jason Keller, starring Matt Damon, Christian Bale are our two big stars. Big cast, lots of people in this story. This movie's from 2019, and again, like I said, I kind of skipped it at the time. Just I'm not a big racer guy, but I think out of the four movies that I'm going to talk about, this one's the one I like the most. But because you have Damon and Christian Bale acting off each other and just really bouncing and being locked in, and just so much charisma on the screen that they're great together. And the story of this one is that basically, Ford wasn't selling as well, and so they were like, oh, maybe we should buy Ferrari, the company, because it wasn't doing very well financially. And it was kind of like almost like a ploy / double bluff, because Ferrari was eventually bought by Fiat, and Enzo Ferrari insulted Ford, and so Ford was like, let's make a car, let's beat them in Le Mans, kind of a thing, ego hit. And then the movie kind of follows that and just chronicles is the word I'm looking for, the entire building, testing, driving of a car that they want to beat Ferrari in Le Mans. And it's really well made. There's some janky CG in like, again, 3 shots or so stick out in my mind. But it's fine. It is what it is. It's like filmmaking from the era, because to recreate Le Mans, they had to like use 5 different tracks. Let me see. Sorry, I can do. Yeah, they had to use 5 different locations and tracks basically. So then they had to like stitch stuff together continuously for not only car position but weather position and like crowd positioning and stuff like that. So obviously that's a VFX nightmare / endurance trial of its own. So so like I said, there's just a few scenes like that here and there, but great movie, great performances. Christian Bale's having fun big time. His character, Ken Miles, he was they're both, what's his name? Shelby. Carroll Shelby is Matt Damon, Ken Miles is Christian Bale, and they're both like drivers and racers, but Shelby has a medical thing where he shouldn't race anymore, but he builds race cars and stuff like that. And so, they both kind of have like that racing ego about them, and Ken Miles in particular is, very much, he knows he's good, and that's how kind of Christian Bale portrays him, in that he knows what's up when it comes to racing, and everyone else wrong. So, yeah, it just causes conflict, and but also, where a lot of the fun comes in the movie. Them just building this car, making it and stuff like that. So, obviously, it's a well-known story, like in real life. So I'm sure like so many of the elements were pulled from real incidents and what have you. Matt Damon. Christian Bale had to train at Bondurant High Performance Driving School, and the school's founder was a friend of Ken Miles, so he was able to hear stories of the racing scene in the 60s, and probably stories about Ken as well. So then he was able to like bring that to the character, which is kind of interesting, like especially watching this one, because spoilers at the end of the movie, Christian Bale, Ken Miles, outside of Le Mans, he dies in a test car, and it's just like, it makes you think back like that so many people, were injured or died just testing these cars and driving these cars and stuff like that. And it's just, like any extreme activity or sport or what have you, it's kind of like, why? But, it's that drive, it's because it's there and all that kind of stuff like that. So, yeah, it's the way the movie portrays it, it's a little different than the real life incident. It's kind of set up early in the film where the test car crashes, catches fire, and they're able to pull Christian Bale out, and they fire extinguish him down and stuff like that. And at the end of the movie, another accident occurs, but then the car, they kind of say, he couldn't get out, because I think, there's a line about how their suit can resist fire for 15 seconds, which is how long it takes to get out of the car. And but basically they're sometimes they don't get out. But the real life incident is kind of crazy, where it was called the J car, which he was testing, and it disintegrated basically in the fatal accident. It was after 10 hours of testing, and it took took a turn on a slight rise, and the car left the road, and it flew through the air and then nosed in, causing it to tumble, catch fire, and eject Miles, who was killed instantly. And then the car was just disintegrated, and so they have no way of kind of determining what exactly went wrong aside from something crazy went wrong. Whereas in the film, you can kind of dramatize. You can see some stuff maybe there's something wrong with the brakes, this or that kind of thing. He mentions, he's like, oh, the brakes are a little kind of off, and then the accident occurs. But the real life situation was a little different, so that was altered. But all that aside, really good movie. Christian Bale had to lose a bunch of weight for it because he had done Vice, and when Matt Damon and Christian Bale kind of have a little punch up, he said that was they both said that it was their favorite scene to do, because they didn't have to do intense choreography, because they, one was Jason Bourne, one was Batman, but they just kind of rehearsed for 20 minutes, and they both kind of just have to look like they're just two dudes having a punch up, not skilled martial artists. Ford distanced itself from the movie, which is kind of interesting. I didn't realize that, because the Leo Bebe, or Bebe, Beebe, is kind of portrayed as the antagonist. He's again, I didn't look this up, but in the film anyway, he's the designer of the Mustang, which Ken Miles is wow, that's a piece of crap, basically, and just insults the car to his face. And then the entire film, this Leo guy is basically trying to sideline or kick Ken Miles off the team, because he's I don't like him, I don't like his attitude, kind of thing. He's not corporate, right? And that's a big part of the movie too, is the corporatization of the racing, and just versus Ferrari's team is depicted as it's just one guy, it's just Enzo Ferrari, and so it's whatever he says goes. Whereas this Ford, it's corporatized, and they're trying to by committee, and they have to the paint color. Everything has to go through all the layers rather than just like a vision. Whereas, so there's some pushback and some conflict with that in the movie, which is well done. Let's see here. Like in real life, like after that loss that Ford at Le Mans wins, like Ferrari basically after that won the next bunch of races, like came back stronger kind of thing. And, they both kind of do their thing now. One thing that was basically interesting is after I watched that one, I watched this one first, and then I ended up watching Le Mans. And it kind of really made me interested in Le Mans. Like I ended up reading, the rules on everything to be like, how does this race actually work? Like, because most races are not 24 hours long. So I ended up watching some stuff about it. I watched like last year's like highlight reel, and then I ended up watching the 2025 Le Mans because it takes place in June. It's all on YouTube. It took me like over a week to watch because it's literally 24 hours of racing. And it's pretty intense. Like it's literally these guys are out there racing at their max. Like there's no slowdown for 24 hours. And there's 3 classes of cars that are on the track at the same time. So I kind of like that aspect where it, the highest, fastest cars, the hypercars, are passing the other 2 classes of cars just constantly. But so it kind of creates like a traffic, and it also kind of shows that like there are cars that are going faster, even though they're all going like over 200K, right? But some are going near 300K on the straights and stuff like that. So it makes for a lot of like interesting actual racing because there's like constant flow and constant movement. It's not just the same people taking the same line trying to be perfect. It's always kind of evolving, which made it very interesting to watch, admittedly. Like I said, I ended up watching the entire race. And one thing, of course, this is depicting early 60s scene, is 2025, and so the cars are so much more reliable, right? Like that's one of the big things in this movie and Le Mans, the 1971 movie. Like cars break down a lot, right? And even in this Ford versus Ferrari one where they're like, oh man, we had to like replace our brakes, and that hadn't been done in the past. Like even though the rule book says like, oh, you can replace components, it's fine, but people were like, well, you can't be replacing brakes, that's like important, blah blah blah. And then they're like arguing a bit about it, whereas watching the 2025 Le Mans, and like now the cars are so modular, they can take off like the entire front or back of the car and just put on a new one. They replaced it like an alternator in one of the cars that broke down, and they're back on the track, and and so it's like the kind of the languaging or the what's allowed is expanded, I think, because out of the 60 cars or 60 so-ish cars in the 2025 one, I think at the end, 10 didn't make the entire trip. So like 50 of them did finish the entire 24-hour race. So anyway, kind of a difference there. But yeah, I did enjoy this movie a ton. Like I said, it was a lot of fun, great acting, really cool stuff. Like if you enjoy that genre of just like hyper competent people being hyper competent, right? Like no one's like, oh, I don't understand and what's going on. It's like, no, let's take this apart. Let's do this. Let's fix it right now kind of thing. So they're like good at what they do, and we get to see that. So yeah, really enjoyed that. It was well made. Highly recommend. And speaking of Ferrari, that'll lead into Ferrari from 2023. This is director Michael Mann, written by Troy Kennedy Martin and Brock Yates. Stars Adam Driver, Shailene Woodley, Penelope Cruz. And I remember when this came out, I almost thought, again, this was like, this is pandemic warping. I thought Ford and Ferrari came out like practically at the same time. Turned out, no, there's like a huge time gap in between. Unless maybe I'm wrong in the 2023. Anyway. But yeah, I didn't know, anything really about the movie going in, and it was kind of interesting where it's just kind of like a couple weeks of Enzo Ferrari's life and just how his passion for racing and his life and his kind of just demeanor, just like all of it, how it kind of affects him and tears him apart at the same time, but it's what he wants to do in life and stuff like that. And so, yeah, it was just kind of interesting versus, again, Ford versus Ferrari shows like it's like a 2-year story or 3-year story kind of a thing. This is just, it's a couple weeks. It's kind of centered around a race called Mille Miglia. Yeah, no, sorry, the Mille Miglia, or Miglia, sorry. Obviously, it's 1,000 miles is the race, right? And it's basically, yeah, just about, people trying to drive for him trying to set up business deals, him manipulating the press, him dealing with his wife, Penelope Cruz, and then his mistress, Shailene Woodley, and about his past, deaths and trauma, and, his drivers. Like, literally, in the beginning of the film, one of his drivers dies on a test track, and it's just like, he needs a new driver. And then the press was like, why did you make him drive that day? And it was like, everything looked fine. The guy made a mistake, but it's like, he was pressuring the driver to drive to try to take back like a speed record. So yeah, very intense, interesting performance from Adam Driver, because, he just has such a big presence and stuff like that, but he has to kind of overpower and also be subservient at times and stuff like that. So yeah, weird movie in that kind of way. But once the race is pretty cool, like the way it's done when it finally starts to kind of get going. You got like, Ferraris and Maseratis are both painted red because back then cars were done by like nationality. So Italian cars were red, French ones were blue, German ones were white, and British cars were dark green. That was kind of interesting. Yeah, I guess I'm just talking around it, but so there's a crash in the movie during the race. And I guess just before that, one of the things that was kind of funny during the depiction was that he had three cars in the race, right? And every car he would tell the driver some kind of way about how they could win the race. So he was like always kind of sort of pitting them against each other at the same time, as being like, yeah, we're a team, we're Ferrari, we're gonna we'll win this. And then as the driver come out, be like, hey, look, your car isn't as fast in the straight, but you'll dominate in the corners, and then you can get up on there, and then you'll take the win. And then the other guy would come and be like, look, your car will dominate the straights. You just lay it all out when you can and take it easy in the corner, save your brakes, and then we'll get there. So it just was kind of comical. And I assume that was kind of his racing team style. It was just, he wanted all three to think that they would be the winner, so one of them would win. But in this race, the Mille Miglia, the car of the new driver, he's going along the straightaway, and everything's going good. They, at the previous pit stop, they inspect the tires, and they're like, okay, no, the tires are running fine, keep it going kind of thing. And he's driving, and then his car, I don't know if this is real. At the end, they kind of say how it was like, oh, his car hit something. So they kind of just show like a piece of debris on the highway, and his car hits it, and the way it's shot was just so unexpected, in that like the camera is like a flat angle, and then all of a sudden from right to left of the frame, the race car just comes flying into the frame, going, hundreds of kilometers an hour, and just through a crowd, and just tumbles. And it was just, and then it kind of follows it a bit, and then it just stops. But it was just so unexpected versus we're with the car to see the beginning of the crash. It's like, no, it just comes flying out of nowhere, and it ragdolls a whole bunch of people. It was terrible, obviously, that accident. And yeah, so because they would run the race through Italy just on regular roads that were closed down and stuff like that, similar to Le Mans does that. At least in the past, it did it more. But they stopped doing that because there was 56 known deaths in 24 races, and then 35 in the last 10 years of it because the cars were getting faster. And so they were just kind of like, no. They stopped doing that format, that race. Actually, kind of interesting, Christian Bale was cast in the movie in 2015, but then had to drop out. Hugh Jackman might have been in the mix there. But I think there was delays on this one because of COVID and stuff like that as well. I know Michael Mann had some difficulties with it. But yeah, this one's really kind of based off of a book by a journalist named Brock Yates. It's a biography of Ferrari, sorry. And then there's another book, Against Death and Time, that chronicles the Mille Miglia. Yeah, so I don't know. Like I said, this one was pretty interesting. Like, it wasn't as much about the racing, versus, like I said, more of the drama and everything surrounding his life and his business and what have you. So it was a different kind of angle compared to the other two movies. I didn't enjoy it, I don't think, as much, but it wasn't like awful and I hated my time and everything like that. But I think, like I said, I would rate it definitely below Ford v Ferrari in my mind. If you're interested, I'd watch it. Otherwise, I'd say give it a pass, kind of a thing. And then, yeah, that leads to the last movie, F1 The Movie, which is a funny title. From this year, 2025, directed by Joseph Kosinski, written by Joseph Kosinski and Aaron Kruger. We got Brad Pitt, Damson Idris, Javier Bardem, and Kerry Condon. The funniest is Shea Wiggum gets like an opening credit, and he's in the opening scene, and I was like, the whole movie, literally the whole movie, I was expecting him to come back in some capacity, and he doesn't. And I was like, oh, that was kind of weird. He gets a full-on shout out in the opening credits, and just, that's it. I mean, good for him, I guess. But this one, so yeah, not a Formula One racing fan myself. Like I said, I was like, oh, I want to put it into this mix, though, to complete the tetralogy. Like I said, it was kind of an inspiration for it. I also did know going in that it was done by Joseph Kosinski, but I didn't know, kind of some of the technology. Like there was a great Corridor Crew video about what they did to shoot this movie, which really kind of piqued my interest. Is basically similarly to Top Gun, he's refined his methods, and they were mounting cameras on F1 cars. The cameras were super miniaturized. They're like 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters, and they're smaller than the ones that they're using on Top Gun. And it really gave him the ability to put you right in the race. Like there's tons of shots where the camera will say kind of like be focused on to the left, showing like Brad Pitt or something like that kind of thing, and then as he turns, the camera just like whips to the front, so you see the action right in front of him, or in the vice versa, without having to cut as much or to cut to a different camera angle, kind of almost in a sense, right? Like it really puts you in the race a lot, which really was cool. Like, and they shot it over the 2023-2024 F1 season. They were there getting race footage and then splicing it all in. They had their cars on the track, and then sometimes on like a sled on different tracks with different cars and everything like that. So it was really a big production. I didn't find, or I should have looked up the budget, but I know that Brad Pitt was paid $30 million for the movie, which is his biggest salary ever. I'm sure it would cost probably $200 at least, because of everything that they had to do, like, and all the VFX, right? This was one of the things, like I was saying, compared to the 1971 Le Mans, like in this movie, again, there's a few crashes, one, full-on spectacular crash, but we have CG tech now. And, either with a combination of CG and real, they can just really enhance stuff like that and what have you. But yeah, so the movie, this one, it's Brad Pitt plays a guy who's just like freelance driver. He just loves driving races. Like, it opens on the 24-hour Daytona, like I said, with Shea Wiggum. And then he's just like on a team, they win, and Shea Wiggum's like, hey, look, I know you want to be freelance, but what if you came back, sign on next year, we do the full season kind of thing. And he's like, no, I'm out, I'm just gonna go drive somewhere else. And then Javier Bardem comes, who's great in the movie. I love him in this movie. He's kind of just having fun with it. And he's like, hey, my team, I might lose it at the end of the season if we don't win a race, because if you don't win one race, they can just kind of force sell the team. And he's like, there's 9 races left, come drive and try to help us win one. And Brad Pitt's like, no, I'm not going to do that, etc., etc. And then eventually, of course, comes and drives in the F1. So there's like the rookie driver who drives on the team. Apex is their team. And Damson Idris, I want to say Idris first name, but that's not his first name. He plays Joshua Pierce, JP, and he's cocky young driver, etc. And then so there's conflict a bit with them as teammates because at this point Brad Pitt's like wizened and he's like, oh, this guy's just taking too many risks, etc. And yeah, it's just about them. So it's not even like a full season. It's not even that they have to like win the championship. It's like they just have to win one race. That's literally the goal of the movie is to just win one race. And so yeah, it's very simple in its story, but I enjoyed it. I think in a theater experience, it probably would have been obviously better because there's, like I said, tons of shots of the racing and the footage and like the track and the cars, etc. Those visuals that would make the theater experience kind of worth it. But similarly to the 1971 Le Mans is that like Brad Pitt's essentially not trying to win a race. He's trying to help JP win a race. And there's a couple times where they get close, but then something goes wrong or there's a tactics error or like there's a crash and stuff like that. So it's just, he's just trying to like help him win. And then at the end of the movie, the team manages to pull one out and what have you. But along the way as well, he's, JP is in the modern era essentially, like whereas Brad Pitt's like a racer from like the 90s kind of a thing. And so he's, doing social media and he's like really trying to like, play up his image and all this kind of stuff. And Brad Pitt's kind of imparting to him. He's like, look, man, he's like, it's all about this, like the driving. He's like, just get out there and drive. And it doesn't matter about this other stuff. And, he's just trying to impart some of that wisdom on him. But he also, it's like a reflection of him from when he was younger too. He was a brash young driver, etc. So anyway, like I said, simple story, but it was well executed and just some really great race footage. They partnered with Formula One to get all this race footage and stuff like that. So it's the real deal. And one of the things is that initially there was some, not pushback, but they were kind of like concern from, Red Bull and other teams like that, where they're like, well, we don't want to be depicted as villains essentially in the movie. But they were like, no, it's not that kind of thing where it's like, the racing and the racing circuit isn't going to be depicted as the villains because no one's antagonizing them. They're more just like, we just need to win a race, right? So, again, that corporatization where it's like, no, everybody's looking good. Like, there's a couple shady business things happening in the background, but it's not by F1, it's by other people, right? But yeah, so the cars that they had kind of made, they had 15 mounts for cameras and they could put 4 at a time. Yeah, like I said, JP has a big crash and it kind of mirrors like a real life crash. And yeah, there's a couple other things I think that if you were a bigger F1 fan, you might recognize from things like they were saying, like there's one where there's a crash and somebody, like they throw like their steering wheel out or whatever kind of thing. And that reflects another real world event that had occurred. Again, I am not in the know. Yeah, one funny thing that even I thought of at the time is that Sonny injures himself in the second to last race. Sonny is Brad Pitt's character, sorry. And so they're like, you can't race in the final race. But then he shows up to the final race and he's like, put me in, coach, kind of a thing. And at the start of the race, or just before the race, I think, they're like, okay, well, because of this driver switch, you're going to be in last position because you didn't drive in a qualifying lap and stuff like that. But apparently it wouldn't have worked because even I was kind of like, they would just let him do that? Apparently it actually would be against the rules that they wouldn't let them actually be able to do that. After the qualifying has started, apparently you can't driver switch. But it's a movie. Right. Yeah, like I said, I ended up enjoying it more than I was expecting. It's obviously 2025, well-made, camera tech, CG, the amount of money behind it, everything looks so slick and, just put you right in there and it looked very real. And so it was kind of good there, like I said, and Kaczynski learned from Top Gun Maverick and just how to put together and where to put the cameras and how to make the race footage look exciting and, as I said, put you in there. So, yeah, enjoyed it a lot more. I think it was also kind of an interesting, progression ramp, right? Because of the 2019, 2023, and then 2025. Like I said, just like that tech increase, like from 2019 to 2025, the 6 years, it's like there's been so much advances in CG, and just if they're given the time to make it look great. So yeah, maybe because I had watched a couple other movies ahead that I was just kind of like in the mode for it. But yeah, that one capped out the Tetralogy, and then I watched the Le Mans, which was pretty entertaining. Yeah. Although it was kind of funny because I watched F1, and then that was actually the weekend of the last race of the F1 season. And I was like, you know what? I watched this movie. I'll watch that race. And so I looked up online. I was like, hey, what time does the race start? And got a time. I'm like, cool. Go to bed, because it was like in the morning. I wake up, turn on the TV. The race was already over. And I was like, what? I was lied to. So that just kind of was like, well, I didn't miss, again, it was just like, I was like, oh, maybe I'll watch one of these just because I watched the movie, but it just didn't happen, which was kind of funny. But yeah, on YouTube, you can watch Le Mans, and like World Endurance Racing stuff is all on there. So I think out of all the four, I think, like I said, Ford vs. Ferrari would be my number one. This one would be number two. And I think 1971 Le Mans would be third, and then Ferrari would probably be at my bottom of the four. Mostly because, like I said, it was more about just different stuff, not about just like more racing that like I was not expecting, but like how I was kind of going through this series of movies. But yeah, that would be my kind of talk about this 4 racing movies. Oh, one thing I did want to say was, many of the movies, especially F1 and Ford vs. Ferrari, but like they all have kind of a speech about racing. Like every single one of them, there's like a speech about racing. But I liked one of the ones that Christian Bale was giving in Ford vs. Ferrari to his kid, because he was talking about like, oh, this crack marks where I'm going to start my turn. And then his son's kind of like, oh, like you can see that kind of thing? Aren't you going like so fast? And Christian Bale's kind of like, it was like, well, when you start to go that fast, he's like, your focus doesn't like narrow, it kind of widens. And then you kind of just like get into a zone. And I've never driven at like race car speeds. Like I've driven like 160 plus on the Coca-Cola, and it's so fun. But I could also like, it's kind of true. Like you don't narrow, you kind of widen your focus, and you start to like see everything ahead as it's kind of coming at you. I don't know. I was kind of, I could relate a little bit to what he was saying there, even though I haven't driven at 300K on a track. But yeah, Matt Damon has a great speech about it. Yeah, Christian Bale does. Brad Pitt. Like every single movie, there's a speech about like either why they're racing or about racing, in their mind. So always be on the lookout for those. But yeah, if you want to hear more of our stuff, you can check us out. Tome of Uselessness on the internet, podcatchers, all podcast services. You can always email us, topic suggestions, questions, comments at tomeofuselessness@gmail.com. Same Instagram, Tome of Uselessness. We're on there. And yeah, that's about it. Stay safe, and thanks for listening.